Hello, everyone. I'm Kamraun.
And I'm Dane. Welcome to the Malazan Brotherhood podcast.
Today, we will be discussing Book 2, Chapter 8, Part 1 of House of Chains, a novel in the Malazan Book of the Fallen.
This podcast series is intended to be a companion to reading or listening to the books set in the Malazan universe. It's not a book review and is not a replacement to reading the books.
We will be covering the events of the books in a linear fashion. There will be spoilers for those that have not read the books. We will try not to spoil anything prior to us covering that portion of the respective book.
Today's episode contains violence of a concussive nature, and thus is not suitable for children.
Our show is listener supported. If you'd like to support us, we'd really appreciate that. You can do so by visiting our Patreon link on our website at horsefrogproductions.com. Currently, we're posting ad-free episodes on Patreon weekly.
Also, we'd really like to hear from you. Send any feedback or comments to contact@horsefrogproductions.com.
All right, Chapter 8, Part 1. The chapter begins with a quote. Among the untried recruits of the 14th Army, fully half originated from the continent of Quan Tali, the very center of the empire. Young and idealistic, they stepped onto blood-soaked ground, in the wake of the sacrifices made by their fathers and mothers, their grandfathers and grandmothers. It is the horror of war that, with each newly arrived generation, the nightmare is reprised by innocence. End quote. And this is from the Shaikh Rebellion, Illusions of Victory, by Imrigan Talabant. We've heard that name before a couple times.
Yeah, once or twice, right?
I wonder how many of these people joined out of a lack of options for any other type of employment. Additionally, how many of the youths of Quan Tali truly care about what is happening in Seven Cities? It is, after all, a different continent, and their sources of information are lacking compared to what we have in society today. Finally, I'm curious how many soldiers are truly loyal to the Malazan Empire and not just loyal to the fellow soldiers they are serving with.
That's an interesting point, especially of that last bit about who they're loyal to, because sometimes I think about this in a workplace situation. And I guess if you're in the military, that's your workplace. But the loyalty to the people that you are directly connected with versus corporate, I guess. And that I feel like, top brass in the military would be considered corporate, I suppose. I would always align with the people that you're working with. If you have a good crew around you, generally your days go pretty smoothly. I have this conversation with a guy that I work with, and people always ask, what's the best job to do where you work? And it's like, it doesn't matter. If you have a good group of people, you can do any of the jobs in here. It's perfectly fine. So if I was in their place, I would think I would be loyal to the people that I was around and not necessarily the military as a whole.
Yeah, I think both you and I are cut from the same cloth in that regard. That being said, this world and this culture in particular, the Malazan culture, you have people like Fiddler, which are examples of those that seem to be really loyal to the Empire, but also it is about their brothers and sisters around them. Which of those supersedes the other? I don't know. Fiddler does seem to always be on the right path for what is right for the Empire, it feels like.
Yeah. And then I guess your first question, how many of these people joined out of lack of options for any other type of employment? I could see that also being a big driver is what are you going to be if you're not a blacksmith or you're not making armor or you're not doing whatever other kind of profession of selling something on a street corner. I guess I'll go into the military. What else can I do? I think that probably affects a lot of people in this world.
In many ways, I guess it's similar with our society. There's a lot of people that join the military just because they have no other options.
Yeah.
It's a way out for them. And then there's some idealists that join because they think they're going to make a difference.
I had a friend in high school, and when 9/11 happened, the next day he was like, I'm signing up. Like that was the driving factor. I don't know if he'd really considered it before that, but that was something that immediately lit a flame in him. And he was like, I'm going to serve my country just because of that. So I guess there's a different path for everybody.
Pat Tillman was an example of that. He was an NFL football player. By all accounts, he certainly has the means. He has a job among some of the elite athletes of the world, making a decent amount of money, and he chooses to go to the military. And ultimately, he ended up getting killed when he was on active duty. There's always a breadth with humanity, lack of options or people that think they're going to go out there and save the world.
Right.
Adjunct Tavora stood alone in front of 4,000 milling, jostling soldiers, while officers bellowed and screamed through the press, their voices hoarse with desperation. Pikes wavered and flashed blinding glares through the dusty air of the parade ground like startled birds of steel. The sun was a raging fire overhead. Fist Gamut stood 20 paces behind her, tears in his eyes as he stared at Tavora. A pernicious wind was sweeping the dust cloud directly towards the adjunct. In moments, she was engulfed. Yet she made no move, her back straight, her gloved hands at her sides. No commander could be more alone than she was now. Alone and helpless. Gamut thought, and worse, this is my legion, the 8th, the first to assemble. Beru fend us all. But she had ordered that he remain where he was, if only to spare him the humiliation of trying to impose some kind of order on his troops. She had, instead, taken that humiliation upon herself. And Gamut wept for her, unable to hide his shame and grief. Man, I feel for both of them. This is a rough start to what's going on with this army.
If that's his legion, why would Tavora want to take control of it and have Gamut on the sidelines?
Okay, I hope I'm not imprinting too much onto this situation, but I think it's because it's better for her to be villainized by the army, for everything to look bad on her, so that Gamut will be able to lead them in the future. If he was out there getting beclowned by all this stuff going on, it undermines the way he looks. Whereas, like we were talking about earlier, the quote-unquote corporate, she is the highest level and maybe understands that in some ways she's so removed from everybody that it's better for her to be the one that is the bad guy. Whereas your fist should probably be the one that is respected among his immediate subordinates.
That makes a lot of sense. I like that.
I do find this interesting, though, from the perspective that Gamut, he had experience in the military, but I think it was the wrong kind of experience for him to be in this role. Like we were talking about, he jumped up a bunch of ranks. And there is a concept of, as you move into leadership, the skills change, especially if you're coming from the lower level. At the lowest level, you're thinking, how do I solve these problems around me? The little day-to-day problems. And then as you start moving up, your hands get further and further removed from the work that you're doing. And it's very difficult for some people to make that transition, if ever. And then at that point, it takes a special person to be able to get the most out of their subordinates, you know, motivating people, getting them in alignment. And so I think what we're seeing here is simply the lack of veterans with experience in leadership positions across the breadth of this entire thing that's causing this issue right here. What do you think about that?
It makes sense. If he, like you said, started off at a lower rank and he's concerning himself with the micro of it all versus as a fist, as an adjunct or whatever, you're handling more macro aspects of commanding a whole army. Like you said, if you jump too quickly, you never develop those skills. So maybe that is what it is. And he's got his own set of, like we've talked about, the imposter syndrome, where he doesn't feel like he deserves it. And maybe that's another aspect to it. He hasn't really figured out how to control a large force like this.
Additionally, it's the people under him that are in the same boat, because everybody was assembled together quickly and flash promotions across the board, it felt like. You know, it's not just Gamut, but it's a similar problem for everybody. And then we'll see a couple outliers here throughout this section we're covering today.
Right. It feels like it's a bit of herding cats right now. A lot of recruits and all that. So, but you're right, we'll get into it.
Aaron's parade ground was a vast expanse of hard-packed, almost white earth. 6,000 fully armored soldiers could stand arrayed in ranks with sufficient avenues between the companies for officers to conduct their review. The 14th Army was to assemble before the scrutiny of Adjunct Tavora in 3 phases, a legion at a time. Gamut's 8th had arrived in a ragged, dissolving mob over 2 bells past, every lesson from every drill lost. The few veteran officers and non-coms locked in a titanic struggle with a 4,000-headed beast that had forgotten what it was. Gamut saw Captain Keneb, whom Blistig had graciously given him to command the 9th Company, battering at soldiers with the flat of his blade, forcing them into a line that broke up in his wake as other soldiers pressed forward from behind. There were some old soldiers in that front row, trying to dig in their heels, sergeants and corporals, red-faced with sweat streaming from beneath their helms. 15 paces behind Gamut waited the other 2 fists, as well as the Wiccan scouts, under the command of Tamul. Nil and Nether were there as well, although, mercifully, Admiral Nock was not, for the fleet had sailed. Impulses at war within him, Gamut trembled, wanting to be elsewhere, anywhere, and wanting to drag the adjunct with him. Failing that, wanting to step forward, defying her direct order to take position at her side. Someone came alongside him. A heavy leather sack thumped into the dust, and Gamut turned to see a squat soldier, blunt-featured beneath a leather cap, wearing barely half of a Marine's standard issue of armor, a random collection of boiled leather fittings over a threadbare, stained uniform, the magenta dye so faded as to be mauve. No insignia was present. The man's scarred, pitted face stared impassively at the seething mob. Gamut swung further round to see an additional dozen decrepit men and women, each standing in arm's reach from the one in front, wearing unrepaired, piecemeal armor and carrying an assortment of weapons, few of which were Malazan. Here we go. If I gave you 2 guesses as to who just showed up, I bet you'd nail it on the first try. I'm having flashbacks to the chain of dogs.
Yeah. It seems like a dead giveaway right now.
Gamut asked the man in the lead, "And who in Hood's name are you people?" The soldier grunted and replied, "Sorry we was late. Then again, I could be lying." Gamut asked, "Late? Which squads? What companies?" The man shrugged and said, "This and that. We was in Aaron jail. Why was we there? This and that. But now we're here, sir. You want these children quelled?" Gamut said, "If you can manage that, soldier, I'll give you a command of your own." The soldier said, "No, you won't. I killed an Untan noble here in Aaron, name of Lanestro, snapped his neck with these 2 hands." That's a name that should be in the bucket with Silgar, Nethpara, and Malik Rel.
Yeah, another despicable noble that I'm sure you and Billy had your fair share to say about him.
Yes. I got to tell a funny story here. Sometimes we'll play a game in the car with the kids or something where this is the scenario, what do you do? It's almost like a choose your own adventure.
Okay.
At one point, my youngest, the solution to every problem was I snap its neck. And it wasn't even something that had a neck. It was so funny because, it's like there's a tree in front of you. I snap its neck. It got really ridiculous, but it was so funny.
Yeah.
That was the solution to anything.
I like it. From the mind of a young boy. This problem is dealt with by snapping the neck.
I don't know where he got it from.
Those kids have got a hell of an imagination.
Oh, yeah. Through the clouds of dust before them, a sergeant had clawed free of the mob and was approaching Adjunct Tavora. For a moment, Gamut was terrified that he would, insanely, cut her down right there. But the man sheathed his short sword, and he drew up before her. Words were exchanged. Fist Gamut made a decision. He said, "Come with me, soldier." The man reached down, collected his kit bag, and said, "Aye, sir." Gamut led him to where Tavora and the sergeant stood. An odd thing happened then. There was a grunt from the veteran at the Fist's side, even as the wiry, red and gray bearded sergeant's eyes flickered past the adjunct and fixed on the soldier. A sudden broad grin, then a quick succession of gestures, a hand lifting, as if holding an invisible rock or ball, then the hand flipping, index finger inscribing a circle, followed by a jerk of the thumb towards the east, concluded with a shrug. In answer to all this, the soldier from the jail gave his kit bag a shake. The sergeant's blue eyes widened. They arrived, coming alongside the adjunct, who swung a blank gaze on Gamut. Gamut said, "Your pardon, adjunct." The Fist would have added more, but Tavora raised a hand and made to speak. She didn't get a chance. The soldier at Gamut's side spoke to the sergeant. "Draw us a line, will ya?" The sergeant said, "I'll do just that." Then he pivoted and returned to the heaving ranks. Tavora's eyes had snapped to the soldier, but she said nothing, for the man had set his bag down, drawn back its flap, and was rummaging inside it. 5 paces in front of the legion's uneven ranks, the sergeant once more drew his sword, then drove its blunt tip into the dust and set off, inscribing a sharp furrow in the ground. Gamut thought, "Draw us a line, will ya?" The soldier crouched over his kit bag, looked up suddenly. He said, "You two still here? Go back to them Wiccans. Then all you pull back another 30, 40 paces. Oh, and get them Wiccans off their horses and a tight grip on the reins. And all of you, take for yourselves a wide stance. Then, when I give the signal, plug your ears." Gamut flinched as the man began withdrawing a succession of clay balls from his bag. He thought, "The bag. That thumped down beside me not 50 heartbeats ago. Hood's breath." Dude. Sappers, man. This sounds like a bunch of cussers to me.
Oh, yeah. That's what I'm thinking of, too.
This casual handling of these things.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Crazy. Adjunct Tavora rasped, "What is your name, soldier?" The man said, "Cuddle. Now, better get moving, lass."
This is the name we haven't seen in a while. I think it was in Deadhouse Gates when they were crossing a river and they blew, I think it was about 40 cussers to stop the enemy advance.
That is correct. And it sounds like he knows his way around munitions, doesn't it?
Hope so, if he's got a bag of what sounds like cussers. But these guys are just built different. A veteran and a sapper, just like Strings. They don't mince words, and they're a little bit crazy.
Does it feel like a bunch of stars have to be in alignment for someone to survive long enough to become a veteran sapper?
Yeah, it really does. It really does. You guys are messing with clay balls that, if I remember correctly, they're not super strong. They can be a little bit fragile. And he's just throwing bags with cussers around, just dropping them. Yeah, the stars have to be in alignment, I think.
Also, to add to that, it feels like maybe it's just the ones that we've seen, they're always involved in some shenanigans at the front or some clandestine operation undermining some type of defenses or something in relation to that.
Yeah.
That adds to the danger beyond just the nature of the explosives.
I agree.
Gamut reached out and touched Tavora's shoulder as he said, "Adjunct, those are." She snapped, "I know what they are, and this man's liable to kill 50 of my soldiers." Cuddle drew out a folding shovel as he growled, "Right now, lady, you ain't got any. Now, take it from me, that otatoral blade at your comely hip ain't gonna help you one bit if you decide to stand here. Pull 'em all back, and leave the rest to me and the sergeant." Unable to keep the pleading from his tone, Gamut said, "Adjunct." Tavora shot him a glare, then wheeled. She said, "Let us be about it then, Fist." He let her take the lead, paused after a few paces to glance back. I thought it was ballsy for Cuddle to speak to the adjunct this way, and interesting that Tavora didn't have him taken back to the jail from whence he came.
Yeah. It certainly speaks to their nature, doesn't it? They speak plainly. That's all there is to it. Every one of them I feel like we've encountered has not been following that sort of military protocol of a certain way to speak to their superiors.
Yeah. They tend to hide or not want to be seen,
Yeah.
not want to have to follow orders from anybody almost.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And when they show up, they talk like this. Was it Cuddle or was it was a different sapper who never came to the meetings that Coltane called, and then when he finally did?
Yes. He didn't want to get promoted. They were trying to promote him to lead the sappers, and he refused and gave it to some random sapper. And she was surprised.
It's good stuff.
That was great.
Yeah.
I want to say that was around the time when Coltane punched Gessler in the face and broke his hand.
Mm-hmm.
It was around that same moment in the book. The sergeant had rejoined Cuddle, who had managed to dig a small hole in what seemed an absurdly short time. The sergeant nodded and said, "Cobble's down there. Perfect." Cuddle replied, "About what I figured. I'll angle these crackers with a cusser a hand's width deeper." The sergeant said, "Perfect. I'd have done the same if I'd thought to bring some with me." Cuddle asked, "You supplied?" The sergeant said, "Well enough." Cuddle said, "What I got here in my bag are the last." The sergeant said, "I can mend that, Cuddle." Cuddle said, "For that, Fid." The sergeant cut in, "Strings." Cuddle said, "For that, Strings, you've earned a kiss." Strings said, "I can't wait." Gamut pulled himself away with a shake of his head and thought, sappers. I imagine he's come across a few of them in his time in the military.
Yeah. With that type of reaction, I guess, yeah. And I also feel like with that reaction, they're all pretty much the same type of person.
Does it feel like they're the problem solvers of the bunch, though? Like, how many times have they come in with some way of solving a problem?
Yeah, they do seem like they're the problem solvers. They are like, I don't know, like the shock trooper. They go in, they're first in, they're doing these kind of crazy maneuvers. They're a really intriguing bunch. And every time we come across them, I love them.
A couple specific examples I'm thinking of. They're the ones that blew the river you're mentioning. So Cuddle was the one. They built the road under the river. You couldn't see it, but allowed Coltane and the refugees to cross at a much more rapid rate than they thought they were going to be able to. So that's one example where the sappers had a really big contribution there. That might have been somebody else's plan, but later on, it seemed like they deserted, but then it turned out that they had buried themselves in that berm. This is the same battle where Nil and Nether used the life force of the horse to help charge up this berm. Mm-hmm. They had buried themselves there, and at the opportune moment, they came out from hiding under the sand and started throwing cussers into the enemy's ranks that allowed them to charge up the hill. And then separately, when they were crossing the river later, I think it was the river of Vathar this time, where Sormo and Nath got killed, the wagon got stuck in the middle of the river, and they actually were able to get it across the river to use it for cover. It was stopping everybody from being able to cross. Mm-hmm. You remember that?
Yeah.
So many examples of them in the moment actively contributing to something, solving the problem that needs to be dealt with that maybe somebody else hadn't thought of.
Yeah, they're an amazing group of soldiers. Love them.
The explosion was a double thump that shook the earth, cobbles punching free of the overburden of dust, which had leapt skyward, to clack and clash in a maelstrom of stone chips and slivers. Fully a third of the legion were thrown from their feet, taking down others with them. Astonishingly, none seemed fatally injured, as if Cuddle had somehow directed the force of the detonation downward and out under the cobbles. As the last rubble pattered down, Adjunct Tavora and Gamut moved forward once again.
Well, that's one way to get everybody's attention.
What an incredible display of aptitude from Fiddler and Cuddle here. Their understanding of how to shape the shockwave and direct it into the ground was really amazing.
Mm-hmm. Really good stuff.
Facing the silenced mob, Cuddles stood with a sharper held high in one hand. He addressed the recruits in a bellowing voice. Next soldier who moves gets this at his feet, and if you think my aim ain't any good, try me. Now, sergeants and corporals, up nice and slow now. Find your squads. You up here in front. Sergeant Strings has drawn us a tidy, nice line. All right, so it's a bit messy right now, so he's drawing it again. Walk up to it easy like, toes and fingers width away from it, boots square. We're going to do this right, or people are going to die. Sergeant Strings was moving along the front line now, ensuring the line was held, spreading soldiers out. Officers were shouting once more, though not as loud as before, since the recruits remained silent. Slowly, the Legion began taking shape. Those recruits were indeed silent and watchful. Gamut noted as he and the adjutant returned to close to their original position, the gaping, smoking crater off to one side. Watchful of the madman with the sharper held high above his head. After a moment, the fist moved up to stand beside Cuddle. Gamut studied the assembled ranks. In a low voice, he asked, "You killed a nobleman?" Cuddle replied, "Aye, Fist, I did." Gamut asked, "Was he on the chain of dogs?" Cuddle said, "He was." Gamut said, "As were you, Cuddle." Cuddle said, "Until I took a spear through the shoulder, went with the others on the Salanda. Missed the final argument, I did. Lanestro was second best. I wanted Pulik Alar to start, but Alar's run off with Malik Rel. I want them both, Fist. Maybe they think the argument's over, but not for me." Gamut said, "I'd be pleased if you took me up on that offer of command." Cuddle said, "No thanks, sir. I'm already assigned to a squad. Sergeant Strings' squad, in fact. Suits me fine." Gamut asked, "Where do you know him from?" Cuddle glanced over, his eyes thinned to slits. Expressionless, he said, "Never met him before today, sir. Now, if you'll excuse me, I owe him a kiss."
I mean, what can you say about these guys? They are insane in the best way possible. Using cussers to get everybody shaped up, holding sharpers, threatening to throw it at fellow soldiers. I know we say this a lot. This is the Marine dialogue that's the most fun to read. It always brings a smile to my face. And as well, the mind games that they play. Earlier, he starts calling Strings Fiddler. Then right here, he says he's never met him before. Gamut asks some question. He said he could be lying. You never know what to believe with these guys.
True. Also, what are the odds that a veteran that knows Fiddler gets assigned to his squad? And that squad is a sister squad to that of Stormy and Gessler. Sounds like an all-star team is being assembled in front of our eyes.
I thought the same thing as I was reading through this. It's like they're getting the best of the best, and they're all kind of congregating in here. I like it.
Yeah, on the point about the dialogue and the subterfuge, I guess information is power, and if they knew how storied any of these people were, they would force them into some other position of leadership, and they're probably thinking, I got the best people around me right now. We're going to be able to make a difference.
Yeah.
If they spread us out, it's not going to be the same.
I agree.
People they trust are surrounding them.
Yeah.
Less than a quarter bell later, Fist Gamut's 8th Legion stood motionless in tight, even ranks. Adjunct Tavora studied them from where she stood at Gamut's side, but had yet to speak. Cuddle and Sergeant Strings had rejoined the 9th Company's 4th Squad. Tavora seemed to reach some decision. A gesture behind her brought Fists Tene Baralta and Blistig forward. Moments later, they came up alongside Gamut and halted. The adjunct's unremarkable eyes fixed on Blistig. She asked, "Your legion waits in the main avenue beyond?" Blistig, his face red, nodded and said, "Melting in the heat, adjunct." But that cusser going off settled them down. Her gaze shifted to the Red Blade as she asked, "Fist Baralta?" Baralta replied, "Calmed, adjunct." Tavora said, "When I dismiss the 8th and they depart the parade ground, I suggest the remaining soldiers enter by company. Each company will then take position, and when they are ready, the next one follows. It may take longer, but at the very least, we will not have a repetition of the chaos we have just witnessed. Fist Gamut, are you satisfied with the assemblage of your troops?" Gamut replied, "Well enough, adjunct." Tavora said, "As am I. You may now—" She got no further, seeing that the attention of the 3 men standing before her had slipped past, over her shoulder, and from the 4,000 soldiers standing at attention, there was a sudden, absolute silence. Not a rustle of armor, not a cough. For the 8th had drawn a single breath, and now held it. Gamut struggled to maintain his expression, even as Tavora raised an eyebrow at him. Then she slowly turned. The toddler had come from nowhere, unseen by any until he arrived to stand in the very spot where the adjunct had first stood, his oversized rust-red talaba trailing like a royal train, blonde hair a tangled shock above a deeply tanned, cherubic face smeared with dirt. The child faced the ranks of soldiers with an air of unperturbed calculation. A strangled cough from among the soldiers, then someone stepped forward. Even as the man emerged from the front line, the toddler's eyes found him, Both arms, buried in sleeves, reached out. Then one sleeve slipped back, revealing the tiny hand, and in that hand was a bone. A human long bone. The man froze in mid-step. The air above the parade ground seemed to hiss like a thing alive with the gasps of 4,000 soldiers. Gamut fought down a shiver, struggling to swallow a welling dread. Then he spoke loudly to the man. Captain Keneb, I suggest you collect your lad, now, before he, starts screaming. Face flushed, Keneb threw a shaky salute, then strode forward. As Keneb gathered him up, the toddler shouted, Neb! Adjunct Tavora snapped to Gamut, Follow me! Then walked to the pair, and she asked, Captain Keneb, is it? Keneb replied, Your pardon, Adjunct. The lad has a nurse, but seems determined to slip through her grasp at every opportunity. There's a blown graveyard behind the... Her tone brittle, Tavora demanded. Is he yours, Captain? Keneb said, As good as, Adjunct. An orphan from the chain of dogs. The historian Duiker placed him into my care. Tavora asked, Has he a name? Keneb replied, Grub. Tavora said, Grub? Keneb's shrug was apologetic. He said, For now, Adjunct, it well suits him. Tavora said, And the 8th, yes, I see that. Deliver him to your hired nurse, Captain. Then, tomorrow, fire her and hire a better one. Or 3. Will the child accompany the army? Keneb said, He has no one else, Adjunct. There will be other families among the camp followers. Tavora said, I am aware of that. Be on your way, Captain Keneb. Keneb stuttered, I am sorry, Adjunct. But she was already turning away, and only Gamut heard her sigh and murmur, It is far too late for that. And she was right. Soldiers, even recruits, recognized an omen when it arrived. Gamut thought, a child in the very boot prints of the woman who would lead this army, raising high a sun-bleached thigh bone. Gods below. What incredible imagery. Seeing this small hand slowly raising that bone up in front of Tavora is pure cinema.
Yeah. The way it's described, it makes it so easy to visualize it.
Yeah,
it's great.
The cloth slowly coming to see the hand come out. Oh, man, It's great.
Yep.
Also, kids of that age are likely to drive you insane. They will slip away from you without a moment's notice. You got to keep your head on a swivel. It's absolutely exhausting taking them anywhere. The park, the beach, the pool, camping, etc.
Yeah.
I was a lifeguard when I was in high school. It was my first job. So I'm used to like scanning the pool constantly. And so when I take the kids, especially when they were younger, I'm constantly monitoring where they are and they get all over the place. Mm-hmm. You can't let your guard down.
Yeah. Isn't it funny to think back to like,
how are we alive? Yes.
How did we
it's
make
incredible, especially since we had a little bit more autonomy than our kids nowadays.
Right.
Cuddle said, Hood's balls skewered on a spit. That's a new one.
Yeah. Gotta add that to the list of Hood's somethings.
The curse was spoken as a low growl in tones of disgust. Strings watched Cuddle set his bag down and slide it beneath the low flatboard bed. The stable that had been transformed into a makeshift barracks held 8 squads now, the cramped confines reeking of fresh sweat and stark terror. At the back wall's urine hole, someone was being sick. After a moment, Strings said, Let's head outside, Cuddle. I'll collect Gessler and Borduk. Cuddle muttered, I'd rather go get drunk. Strings said, Later, we'll do just that. But first, we need to have a small meeting. Still, the other man hesitated. Strings rose from his cot and stepped close. He said, Aye, it's that important. Cuddle said, All right, lead on. Strings. As it turned out, Stormy joined the group of veterans that pushed silently past ashen-faced recruits, many of them with closed eyes and mouthing silent prayers, and headed out into the courtyard. It was deserted, Lieutenant Randall, who had proved pathetically ineffective at the assembly, having fled into the main house the moment the troop arrived. All eyes were on Strings. He in turn studied the array of grim expressions around him. There was no doubt among them concerning the meaning of that omen, and Strings was inclined to agree. He thought, A child leads us to our deaths, a leg bone to signify our march, withered under the curse of the desert sun. We've all lived too long, seen too much, to deceive ourselves of this one brutal truth. This army of recruits now see themselves as already dead.
Okay, there's some explanation. I was going to ask this a little earlier in reference to what they were talking about, because I didn't remember one specifically. This sounds like a little bit of description.
For us coming from a modern society, I can see how we'd think, what's the big deal? But in this world, with gods, magic, and especially curses, I can totally see how this would be viewed as ominous, especially to a bunch of green recruits.
Oh, yeah. Well, you see how all their reactions were immediately to take one collective gasp.
It was almost universally accepted as a bad sign.
Right.
Stormy's battered, red-bearded face finally twisted into an expression too bitter to be wry. He said, "If you're going to say that us here have a hope at Hood's Gate in fighting the Tide Strings, you've lost your mind. The lads and lasses in there ain't unique. The whole damn 3 legions." Strings cut in, "I know. We ain't none of us stupid. Now, all I'm asking is for a spell of me talking. Me talking. No interruptions. I'll tell you when I'm done. Agreed?" Borduk turned his head and spat. He said, "You're a hood damn bridge burner." Strings replied, "Was. Got a problem with that?" Sergeant Borduk of the 6th Squad grinned and said, "What I meant by that, Strings, is that, for you, I'll listen, as you ask." Gessler muttered, "Same with us." Stormy was nodding agreement at his side. Strings faced Cuddle. He asked, "And you?" Cuddle replied, "Only because it's you and not Hedge, Fiddler. Sorry, Strings." Dude, that got me. Really. R.I.P. Hedge, though.
Yeah. It was funny. The respect
like,
levels. Yeah.
Everybody's always dogging on this guy.
Yeah.
How did Fiddler put up with it? They're supposed to be besties, you know?
Mm-hmm. It makes you wonder, but I can't think of specifically why everybody's dogging on him so much, but he does seem to get a lot of hate.
They're so mean to that guy.
Yeah. Poor guy throws himself on a Custer to save everybody else, and he's still catching strays.
At the end of the day, though, I think they felt that loss. I think it's like someone that you're really close to that annoys you. At the end of the day, it's coming from a place of love. Too much time being spent together in a confined space that's probably causing a lot of these problems.
Yeah.
They're little mannerisms that annoy you, but they did feel his loss. You know, they're mourning that.
You probably have to do stuff like this a little bit too. Joke to get through it. Maybe it did actually hurt more than you want to let on. And the only way to get over it is to crack these little jokes and stuff.
True. I don't know that these guys know that Hedge is dead yet.
Oh, that could be too. Yeah, they didn't know. Specifically. All right.
Borduk's eyes widened in recognition of the name. He spat a second time. Strings said, "Thank you." Cuddle said, "Don't thank us yet." He took the edge off with a slight smile. Strings said, "All right, I'll start with a story. Has to do with Nock, the admiral, though he wasn't an admiral back then, just the commander of 6 Drawmans. I'd be surprised if any of you have heard this story, but if you have, don't say nothing. But its relevance here should have occurred to you already. 6 Drawmans, on their way to meet the Kartul fleet. 3 pirate galleys, which had each been blessed by the island's priests of Drek, the Worm of Autumn. Yes, you all know Drek's other name, but I said it for emphasis. In any case, Nock's fleet had stopped at the Napan Isles, went up the mouth of Kulibor River to drag barrels, drawing fresh water, what every ship did when heading out to Kartul or beyond on the Reach. 6 ships, each drawing water, storing the barrels below decks. Half a day out of the Napan Isles, the first barrel was broached by a cook's helper on the flagship, and straight out through the hole came a snake. A Perrault, up the lad's arm, sank both fangs into his left eye. Screaming, he ran out on deck, the snake with his jaws wide and holding tight, writhing around. Well, the lad managed 2 steps before he died. Then he went down, already white as a sun-bleached yard. The snake was killed, but as you can imagine, it was too late. Nock, being young, just shrugged the whole event off, and when word spread and sailors and marines started dying of thirst in ships loaded with barrels of fresh water that no one would dare open, he went and did the obvious thing. Brought up another barrel, breached it with his own hands. Strings paused. He could see that no one else knew the tale, could see that he had their attention. He continued. The damn barrel was full of snakes, spilling out onto the deck. A damn miracle Nock wasn't bitten. It was just starting dry season, you see. The Perrault season in the river was ending. The waters fill with them as they head down to the river mouth on their way out to sea. Every single barrel on those 6 Drawmans held snakes. The fleet never closed to do battle with the Kartulians. By the time it made it back to Nap, half of the complement was dead of thirst. All 6 ships were holed outside the harbor, packed with offerings to Drek, the Worm of Autumn, and sent to the deep. Nock had to wait until the next year to shatter Kartul's paltry fleet. 2 months after that, the island was conquered. He fell silent for a moment, then shook his head and said, "No, I'm not finished. That was a story of how to do things wrong. You don't destroy an omen by fighting it. No, you do the opposite. You swallow it whole." Confused expressions. Gessler was the first to clear, and at the man's grin, startling white in his bronze-hued face, String slowly nodded and said, "If we don't close both hands on this omen, we're all nothing more than pallbearers to those recruits in there, to the whole damned army." String said, "Now, didn't I hear the captain mention something about a nearby cemetery? Blown clear, the bones exposed to all. I suggest we go find it, right now." "All right, I'm finished talking." Stormy growled, "That was a damn thigh bone." Gessler stared at his corporal.
I absolutely love this. Strings is so clever. He sees what this omen could do to the army and sees how he can try to spin it into something positive instead of leaving it to destroy everyone's morale. I love it. Another thing is he got this story about Nock and the snakes, drawing that comparison to his own army. It kind of makes me wonder if he didn't have that, would his plan work? Would everyone think he's completely crazy if he was just like, we need to go get all these bones? And maybe they'd be like, what are you talking about? But
it's a good question. I don't see anyone else coming up with a better solution, though.
That's a good point.
This story about Admiral Nock with the snakes and the water casks is one that I think about quite a bit, actually. I couldn't remember which book it was in, and it definitely left an impression on me.
Yeah.
I absolutely love it.
Yeah, this is good stuff. I mean, it's an interesting story that comes from somebody else. I guess sometimes you get these little information drops from odd places. You hear the story about Admiral Nock before he was an admiral from Fiddler, from Strings, instead of somewhere else. It's just kind of an interesting way to hear it. I like it.
Tavora said, "We march in 2 days' time." Gamut silently added to the adjunct's announcement, "Before anything else happens." He glanced over at Nil and Nether, where they sat side by side on the bench against the wall, both racked with shivers, the aftermath of the omen's power leaving them huddled and pale. Mysteries stalked the world. Gamut had felt their chill breath before, a reverberation of power that belonged to no god, but existed nonetheless, as implacable as the laws of nature. Truths beneath the bone. To his mind, the Empress would be better served by the immediate disbanding of the 14th Army, a deliberate and thorough breaking up of the units with reassignments throughout the Empire, the wait of another year for another wave of recruits. That is extreme. I guess it's similar to the way Nock handled that situation, though, so maybe that's just how they handle situations like these.
Right. And I guess to Strings' point, trying to avoid something like that, who knows what happens in a year's time or even more. It does sound extreme, breaking up a whole army, shipping them off to different locations, and then trying to start again. If you're trying to fight the Whirlwind Rebellion, giving them another year's time, I mean, it all sounds bad.
Adjunct Tavora's next words to those gathered in the chamber seemed to speak directly to Gamut's thoughts. She was uncharacteristically pacing as she said, "We cannot afford it. The 14th cannot be defeated before it sets foot outside Erin. The entire subcontinent will be irretrievably lost if that happens. Better we get annihilated in Raraku. Shaikh's forces will have at least been reduced. 2 days. In the meantime, I want the Fist to call their officers together, rank of lieutenant and higher. Inform them I will be visiting each company in person, beginning tonight. Give no indication of which one I will visit first. I want them all alert. Apart from guard postings, every soldier is restricted to barracks. Keep a particular eye on veterans. They will want to get drunk, and stay drunk if they can. Fist Beralta, contact Orto Cetral and have him assemble a troop of Red Blades. They're to sweep the settlement of the camp followers and confiscate all alcohol and durhang or whatever else the locals possess that deadens the senses. Then establish a picket round that settlement. Any questions? Good. You are all dismissed. Gamut, send for Tamber." Gamut said, "Aye, Adjunct." Then he thought, "Uncharacteristically careless. That perfumed lover of yours has been kept from the sights of everyone here but me. They know, of course, even so."
I like this bit. She's obviously very intelligent, even though there are a lot of people that think she's untested or unqualified to lead them. And that she can see what will happen to her army if they don't get a move on is really impressive. I'm remembering that epigraph from Chapter 7, "An army that waits is soon an army at war with itself," not to mention how everybody's feeling about the omen.
What do you think about this lockdown? Is it justified?
You mean with no alcohol?
Yeah, pretty strict. Everybody's restricted to barracks, all that kind of stuff. What do you think of that?
It is strict, but I can see it from her point of view. She's probably 100% right. Everybody's just want to get bombed out of their mind. And then if she wants to leave in 2 days, how's she going to be able to get everybody mustered and start to march if you've got the majority of your forces are just drunk? So I could see it justified. I would say yes.
Yeah. From a tactical perspective, I think she's on the right track. She seems to be doing what needs to be done here to keep things under control from devolving. Probably get a lot of deserters.
Yeah.
Even,
yeah. That was String's conversation with some of the guys in his barracks, right? So not everybody has the full story. These guys obviously don't have the story of what Strings is thinking about. So you're probably very right that people would want to desert, get the hell out of Dodge.
You know what's interesting? Part of me thinks that Tavora might have that story. She seems like the type that has access to a lot of information, studying scrolls and such that maybe other people wouldn't pay mind to.
Yeah, it could be. I guess we don't know yet, but it certainly sounds like something she could have.
Outside in the hallway, Blistig exchanged a nod with Beralta, then gripped Gamut's upper arm as he said, "With us, if you please." Nil and Nether shot them a glance, then hurried off. Gamut said quietly, "Take that damned hand off me. I can follow without your help, Blistig." The grip fell away. They found an empty room, once used to store items on hooks fixed 3/4 of the way up all 4 walls. The air smelled of lanolin. Sheep's wool.
Are you doing a little Ron Burgundy there?
Yes.
Lanolin? Lanolin?
How often do you hear that word?
You don't.
In modern time.
What other choice do you have? Love it.
Not every day you're presented with that opportunity. Without preamble, Blistig said, "Time's come. We cannot march in 2 days' time, Gamut, and you know it. We cannot march at all. There will be a mutiny at worst, and best an endless bleeding of desertions. The 14th is finished." The satisfied gleam in the man's eyes triggered a boiling rage in Gamut. He struggled for a moment, then managed to clamp down on his emotions, sufficient to lock gazes with Blistig and ask, "Was that child's arrival set up between you and Keneb?" Blistig recoiled as if struck. Then his face darkened. He said, "What do you take me for?" Gamut snapped, "Right now, I'm not sure." The once commander of the Aaron garrison tugged on the peace loop from his sword's hilt, but Tenebralta stepped between the two men, armor clanking. I was like, "Slow down there, Karsa."
Yeah.
Going for a duel immediately.
For blood.
Yeah. Taller and broader than either Malazan, Tenebralta reached out to set a gloved hand on each chest, then slowly pushed the men apart and rumbled, "We are here to reach agreement, not kill one another." He faced Blistig and continued, "Besides, Gamut's suspicion had occurred to me as well." Blistig rasped, "Keneb would not do such a thing, even if you two imagined that I might." Gamut thought, a worthy answer. He pulled away and strode to face the far wall, back to the others. His mind raced. Then he finally shook his head. Without turning round, he said, "She asked for 2 days." Blistig said, "Asked? I heard an order." Gamut replied, "Then you were not listening carefully enough, Blistig. The adjunct, young and untested though she may be, is not a fool. She sees what you see, what we all see. But she has asked for 2 days. Come the moment to march, well, a final decision will become obvious. Either way, at that moment. Trust her." He swung round and continued, "For this and this alone, if need be, 2 days." After a long moment, Beralta nodded and said, "So be it." Blistig said, "Very well." Gamut thought, "Beru bless us." As he made to leave, Tenebralta touched his shoulder and said, "Fist, what is the situation with this Ta'amber? Do you know? Why is the adjunct being so cagey? Women who take women for lovers, the only crime is the loss to men, and so it has always been." Gamut replied, "Cagey? No, Tenebralta, private. The adjunct is simply a private woman." Tenebralta persisted. "What is this Ta'amber like? Does she exercise undue influence on our commander?" Gamut said, "I have no idea, to answer your latter question. What is she like? She was a concubine, I believe, in the Grand Temple of the Queen of Dreams, in Unta. Other than that, my only words with her have been at the adjunct's behest. Nor is Ta'amber particularly talkative." Gamut thought, "And that is an understatement of prodigious proportions. Beautiful, aye, and remote. Has she undue influence over Tavora? I wish I knew." Then he said, "And speaking of Ta'amber, I must leave you now." At the door he paused and glanced back at Blistig, then said, "You gave good answer, Blistig. I no longer suspect you." In reply, the man simply nodded.
Part of me is a little surprised that Gamut would suspect Blistig of sending Grubb into the army as a setup. And actually, now that I'm thinking about it, maybe it has something to do with Blistig's little grin at the suggestion of it when they first started talking. But more than that, I get the feeling Blistig is just broken after what happened to Coltane and Aaron in general. But to sabotage an entire army, rage, anger, guilt, that makes sense to me, but I don't really see sabotage. What do you think?
I haven't seen anything yet that would indicate he is outwardly mutinous like that. It is still early, though, and his attitude is just rotten.
Yeah, he does have a bad attitude, doesn't he?
Yeah, we'll have to see more about how his arc progresses, I think.
Okay.
Lostara Yil placed the last of her red blade accoutrement into the chest, then lowered the lid and locked it.
You rascal.
She straightened and stepped back, feeling bereft. There had been a vast comfort in belonging to that dreaded company. That the Red Blades were hated by their tribal kin, reviled in their own land, had proved surprisingly satisfying, for she hated them in turn. Born a daughter instead of the desired son in a Pardu family, as a child she had lived on the streets of Erlitan. It had been common practice, before the Malazans came with their laws for families, among many tribes to cast out their unwanted children once they reached the 5th year of life. Acolytes from numerous temples, followers of mystery cults, regularly rounded up such abandoned children. No one knew what was done with them. The hopeful among the rough circle of fellow urchins Lostara had known had believed that, among the cults, there could be found a kind of salvation. Schooling, food, safety, all leading to eventually becoming an acolyte in turn. But the majority of children suspected otherwise. They'd heard tales of, or had themselves seen, the occasional nightly foray of shrouded figures emerging from the backs of temples, wending down alleyways with a covered cart, on their way to the crab-infested tidal pools east of the city. Pools not so deep that one could not see the glimmer of small picked bones at the bottom. One thing all could agree on: the hunger of the temples was insatiable. Optimistic or pessimistic, the children of Erlatan's streets did all they could to evade the hunters with their nets and pole ropes. A life could be eked out, a kind of freedom won, bitter though it might be. Midway through her 7th year, Lostara was dragged down to the greasy cobbles by an acolyte's net. Her shrieks went unheeded by the citizens who stepped aside as the silent priest dragged his prize back to the temple. Impassive eyes met hers every now and then on that horrible journey, and those eyes Lostara would never forget. Rashan had proved less bloodthirsty than most of the other cults in the habit of hunting children. She had found herself among a handful of new arrivals, all tasked with maintenance of the temple grounds, destined, it seemed, for a lifetime of menial servitude. The drudgery continued until her 9th year, when for reasons unknown to Lostara she was selected for schooling in the shadow dance. She had caught rare and brief glimpses of the dancers, a hidden and secretive group of men and women for whom worship was an elaborate, intricate dance. Their only audience were priests and priestesses, none of whom would watch the actual dancers, only their shadows. They would say, "You are nothing, child, not a dancer. Your body is in service to Rashan, and Rashan is this realm's manifestation of shadow, the drawing of darkness to light. When you dance, it is not you that is watched. It is the shadow your body paints. The shadow is the dancer, Lostariel, not you." Years of discipline, of limb-stretching training that loosened every joint, that drew out the spine, that would allow the caster to flow with seamless movement, and all for naught. The world had been changing outside the temple's high walls. Events unknown to Lostara were systematically crushing their entire civilization. The Malazan Empire had invaded, cities were falling. Foreign ships had blockaded Erlatan's harbor. The cult of Rashan was spared the purges of the new, harsh masters of 7 cities, for it was a recognized religion. Other temples did not fare as well. She recalled seeing smoke in the sky above Erlatan and wondered at its source, and she was awakened at night by terrible sounds of chaos in the streets. Lostara was a middling caster. Her shadow seemed to have a mind of its own and was a recalcitrant, halting partner in the training. She did not ask herself if she was happy or otherwise. Rashan's empty throne did not draw her faith as it did the other students. She lived, but it was an unquestioning life, neither circular nor linear, for in her mind there was no movement at all, and the notion of progress was measured only in terms of mastering the exercises forced upon her.
Her shadow having a mind of its own is pretty funny to me. You wouldn't think of a shadow doing that, of course, but I'm reminded of Peter Pan's shadow doing whatever it wanted and misbehaving.
That is a great pull, because I was having trouble trying to place what behavior I was imagining in my mind, and it's literally Peter Pan's shadow just acting up.
Yeah.
That's great. The cult's destruction was sudden, unexpected, and it came from within. She recalled the night when it had all begun. Great excitement in the temple. A high priest from another city was visiting, come to speak with Master Bidithal on matters of vast importance. There would be a dance in the stranger's honor, for which Lostara and her fellow students would provide a background sequence of rhythms to complement the shadow dancers. Lostara herself had been indifferent to the whole affair, and had been nowhere close to the best of the students in their minor role in the performance, but she remembered the stranger. So unlike sour old Bidithal, tall, thin, a laughing face, remarkably long-fingered, almost effeminate hands the sight of which awakened in her new emotions that stuttered her mechanical dancing, that sent her shadow twisting into a rhythm that was counterpoint to that cast by not only her fellow students, but the shadow dancers themselves, as if a third strain had slipped into the main chamber, too striking to remain unnoticed. Bidithal himself, his face darkening, had half risen, but the stranger spoke first. His eyes finding Lostara's own, the man said, "Pray, let the dance continue. The Song of the Reeds has never been performed in quite this manner before. No gentle breeze here, Bidithal? Oh no, A veritable gale. The dancers are virgins, yes? His laugh was low yet full. Then he said, Yet there is nothing virginal about this dance now, is there? Oh, storm of desire. And those eyes held Lostara still, in fullest recognition of the desire that overwhelmed her, that gave shape to her shadow's wild cavort. Recognition, and a certain pleased but cool acknowledgement, as if flattered, but with no invitation offered in return. The stranger had other tasks that night, and in the nights that followed, or so Lostara would come to realize much later. At the moment, however, her face burned with shame, and she had broken off her dance to flee the chamber. Of course, Delat had not come to steal the heart of a caster. He had come to destroy Rashan.
Hey, quick, Ben. What am I missing here? He is a practitioner of Rashan, so why would he be destroying it? Is this a seed that needs to grow, maybe?
The next sentence establishes the timeline. Quick Ben was a bridge burner at this time, so my guess is he was working at the behest of the Emperor to undermine Rashan, since Kelonved was planning to take over the Throne of Shadow.
Okay. All right. One more thing. I found it interesting that Lostara is saying she's not that good of a shadow dancer, but once Quick Ben shows up, the shadow starts behaving in an unusual way. And that intrigues me, and I wonder why. I don't really see if there's an explanation here, but I kind of think that that's an interesting little tidbit, that the shadow starts, what's it say here?
Cavorting.
It was cavorting, but it had something to do with overtaking the other dancers. It sent a shadow twisting into a rhythm that was counterpoint to the cast, not only of her students, but of the shadow dancers themselves. I found that kind of interesting that once he arrives, the shadow seems to be doing a little something extra.
The way I interpret it, the shadow dancers, their worship is to Rashan, but she didn't have that component of it. So I think a lot of this is translation of the emotion that the dancers are feeling in relation to their relationship with the empty throne. She introduced this additional emotional component that she's feeling right now, which is probably not part of the standard things that these people are trying to embody with their dancing.
Okay.
Sometimes you have an established means of doing something, and then somebody will come in and throw a wrench in the works, and it actually moves things forward in a way, potentially. I'm not saying that's the case here, but sometimes there's like a paradigm shift in the way things are done from an established way, and then from that point forward, people start doing them that way, you know? Okay. And so maybe, I think it's largely that addition of what she's feeling that the other dancers are not feeling, but then separately, there's the higher level concept of sometimes things just change too, you know, because some savant comes in and realizes that there's more to doing something than the way people are doing it now.
Okay. I hadn't thought about it that way. Okay.
Delat, who, it proved, was both a high priest and a bridge burner, and whatever the Emperor's reason for annihilating the cult, his was the hand that delivered the death blow. Although not alone, the night of the killings, at the bell of the 3rd hour, 2 past midnight, after the Song of Reeds, there had been another hidden in the black clothes of an assassin. Do you think this was Dancer or Kalam?
I had not even considered Dancer, to be honest. Just because it was mentioned that Delat was there, bridge burners at the behest of the Empress, that it would be Kalam.
Uh-huh.
But it doesn't seem out of the realm of possibility.
It's probably most likely Kalam, right?
That's what I think.
Okay, yeah.
But
because
very
it's Quick Ben and
Kalam.
Kalam was known for dealing with this type of stuff already, so it probably makes more sense. The only reason I bring up Dancer is because when we're talking about undermining Rashan, there's a personal investment from him that he's probably wanting to deal with this, to do what him and Shadow Throne are trying to do.
Mm-hmm.
Also, the next part of this section, Dancer is brought up.
Between what happens in the next section and what happened in, was it last chapter, when Hebrick was talking to Bidithal, and Bidithal's hatred of Cotillion and Shadow Throne, that's where the Dancer aspect, I feel like, could slip in, where it could be. But I guess so far it's not 100% clear.
Yeah. Lostara knew more of what had happened that night in the Rashan Temple of Erlitan than anyone else, barring the players themselves, for Lostara had been the only resident to be spared, or so she had believed for a long time, until the name of Bidithal rose once more from Shaikh's apocalypse army. Lostara thought, I was more than spared that night, wasn't I? Delat's lovely, long-fingered hands.
She certainly was. I'm sure it was only a matter of time before the dirty old Bidithal got up to his ways.
Yeah, I do wonder why he was allowed to escape. Or maybe he was just slippery enough to get away.
I wonder the same thing, which it was. You know, which was it? allowed to escape or he did it on his own because he is a little bit crafty.
Yeah.
Either way, it's a shame.
Yeah, she did dodge a bullet there, feels like.
Yep, big time.
Setting foot onto the city streets the following morning, after 7 years' absence, she had been faced with the terrifying knowledge that she was alone, truly alone, resurrecting an ancient memory of when she was awakened following the 5th birthday and thrust into the hands of an old man hired to take her away, to leave her in a strange neighborhood on the other side of the city, a memory that echoed with a child's cries for her mother. The short time that followed her departure from the temple before she joined the Red Blades, the newly formed company of 7 cities natives who avowed loyalty to the Malazan Empire, held its own memories, ones she had long since repressed. Hunger, denigration, humiliation, and what seemed a fatal spiraling descent. But the recruiters had found her, or perhaps she found them. The Red Blades would be a statement to the Emperor, the marking of a new era in 7 cities. There would be peace. None of this interested Lostara, however. Rather, it was the widely held rumor that the Red Blades sought to become the deliverers of Malazan justice. She had not forgotten those impassive eyes, the citizens who were indifferent to her pleas, who had watched the acolyte drag her past to an unknown fate. She had not forgotten her own parents. Betrayal could be answered by but one thing, and one thing alone. And the once Captain Lostariel of the Red Blades had grown skilled in that answer's brutal delivery. I really appreciate the depth that we get with this backstory to explain her motivations for joining the Red Blades. There's a lot of trauma driving her.
Mm-hmm. These couple of mentions of the impassive eyes watching her getting taken away as a child and all that kind of stuff. Living in and around the New York City area, I'm sure this kind of thing happens in a lot of big cities. Things get too busy. People get callous to what goes on around them, see something happening, but they move on anyway. And I can imagine being a child like that, witnessing just, you need a little help, and everybody just walks on past. What she's feeling is really sad, and I can see some probably despair as a child, her as a child. Interesting, though, that she remembers all that and she wants revenge.
The largest issue here is the abandonment by the parents. Even if it's culturally normalized, I mean, that is a scar that is never going to heal.
Yeah, you're right.
That's the first betrayal. Then this cultural betrayal of not ever getting any help. The first time she was abducted when she was 7, the trouble she had surviving on her own the second time. So that self-hatred of your culture on top of the scar of the parents, that's like a really tough situation to have to deal with, you know?
That's a lot to go through from 5 to 7, 8 years old. That's a lot to go through as a really young kid.
Yeah. Lostara thought, and now am I being made into a betrayer? She turned away from the wooden chest. She was a Red Blade no longer.
I was going to ask this question before, and that answers it. I wondered if she was just putting her stuff into a chest because she was going undercover, or if she was actually leaving the Red Blades.
I don't think she wants to be identified as a Red Blade during this clandestine operation, supporting a Claw agent.
Okay.
Now, I'm unclear as to whether it's considered permanent or not.
That's a good point, though. Not being recognized. I mean, they have a very distinct armor and everything. You know, that makes sense. So, okay.
It'd probably jam them up.
Yeah, definitely.
All right, we're going to stop here and we will finish out the chapter next week. For standout moments.
You have to love these sappers. Such an entertaining group of Marines, burying cussers, directing the blast downward, screaming at the recruits, holding grenades. It's too good.
It's a truly memorable moment, a core memory from the books for me. And I love how they took over the situation and got things under control.
Yeah.
To add to that, I'm looking forward to the future shenanigans that Cuddle and Fiddler are surely going to get up to.
You're right. This is only the beginning. It's just going to get so much better. This omen is pretty interesting, too. I guess the Marines are a bit superstitious in general. Maybe this group is a little more so than usual, but we can see that it's got the whole army spooked, and Tavora wants to get them moving. And I'm thinking of kind of Tony Robbins, motion creates emotion. She wants to get them marching so they don't get bogged down and thinking about this omen.
I second that motion creates emotion sentiment here. Also applicable, idle hands are the devil's workshop, I think.
Oh, yeah.
Sitting and wallowing will quickly lead to a spiral down the drain. Not a good thing. Especially after experiencing something like the omen that left such a mark on these young recruits. Perhaps that is why Tavora had the alcohol and drugs confiscated. Being idle and emotionally distressed is one thing, but then that being compounded by the use of drugs and alcohol can only make things worse.
Yeah, you're right.
Also, the omen, that's another core memory. How many in this chapter? Seriously, you know, it's like there's another one too. You know, I think about this chapter a lot because there's only so many from each book and a lot of the finer details get glossed over. But for whatever reason, this section really stuck with me.
For me, I don't want to go too far ahead, but there are a lot of things that get set up in this book that I had forgotten about where they came from, that it was this book, that some of these seeds are planted. They start in this book. It's really good. And yeah, this is just an exceptional section. That we also have this Strings coming up with this plan on his own to try and use the bones to spin it a different way. It's like quick thinking on your feet, and I loved it.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing how that plays out.
I agree.
I enjoyed that meeting of the minds with all the veterans where Fiddler told the story about Nock's fleet. Their respect for Fiddler is notable, as is their lack of respect for Hedge.
Yeah.
That story about Nock's fleet is a core memory of the books for me. That's the other one from this section. How many are there?
Yeah.
It's really impressive for just the first half of this chapter.
Yes, it is. Getting a little bit of Lestara's backstory is really nice. Finding out she was abandoned by her family and all that sad stuff. I think it's interesting that she was chosen by the cult of Rashan, and I don't think we've ever heard of this shadow dancing before in any of the previous books, but I really want to know more about the shadow dancing stuff.
Yes, the shadow dancing sounds really cool. I'd like to know what made them spare her, and also whether Bidithal escaped or was spared. Those are two things that I'd be interested to know about.
Me too.
All right, great job today, Dane.
Good job, Kamraun.
You got any final thoughts before...
Kamraun, do you have any final thoughts before we drop off here?
I love this concept of the veterans, particularly Cuddle and Fiddler today, coming in and using their experience to help get this legion off to a better start. Similar to how they knew how to deal with the piss smell in the stables, they're teaching these young greenhorns the way to act and live in the world. And it reminds me a bit of when we first started at the car dealership. We had mentors that would do the same for us.
Oh, yeah.
They'd kind of teach us the ropes and don't do this, you're doing it wrong, all that kind of stuff. Experience goes a long way in this world, and the willingness of the elders to share this with the younger generation is so important.
Yeah, I agree. That's a good simile there between this and the car dealerships that helps cement it for me. Because you're right. Without those guys, just a bunch of young idiots in that shop.
Yes.
And the stuff that we got up to anyway, even with them around, was absurd and not good workplace etiquette. But yeah, to have them to kind of keep you on the tracks, I guess, because it would have spiraled out of control without them.
Oh, yeah.
Good stuff.
All right. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you next week.
We'll see you next week.